So you're just coming off your beginner bike. You've started off with the Patrician Gixxer 250 over here. You've learned everything you need to learn, or so you think, and you're ready to jump up. But you probably shouldn't jump up to something this crazy. This is a 200 horsepower supercharged motorcycle. So you might be looking at some motorcycles like these. These are these new 660 class motorcycles. They're a little bit different than this Triumph Trident we're calling a beginner bike, but it's probably more of an intermediate bike. And then Aprilia's got this sweet RS660 over here, makes about 100 horsepower, and it's a very ideal second motorcycle in my opinion. But if you're stuck between these two motorcycles, let's find out today which one you should get. Spike, what are you doing on the side of the road? What are you up to?
I'm trimming my bush, man. It's looking a little shaggy.
Trimming your bush with those?
Yeah, man. It's just what I got lying around.
That looks like an entry-level option to trimming your bush. What you guys really should consider is this: the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0, baby. The Lawnmower 3.0 is the finest grooming tool for your groin, your downstairs, your grundle, whatever you want to call it. This right here is the only tool you need for the job. Skin-safe technology, so you never nick your sack, and if you do, you can send it back. Best part about this is you can get it as part of the performance package. Get yourself the weed whacker, the nose hair trimmers, all kinds of good stuff. Hit the link down below. Manscaped is a proud supporter of our channel, and they have been for well over 2 years now. You hit the link down below, you get your discount code automatically applied. If you love the linear torque curve of a Trident triple, you're gonna love the instant torque on this bad boy. Spike, come on, we gotta go. It's not time for this, come on.
All right, fine, I'll come back.
Alrighty everybody, we figured we'd spare you and get started today in motion on the bikes and rolling because you're here to see some action. So we are comparing and contrasting the Aprilia RS660 and the Trident 660. Now, what we're doing today is trying to determine who really should get one of these bikes and how does it work as a second bike, and you know, if you're stepping up the displacement ladder, what is it like between these two? Spike, this is actually your first time riding the Trident. Why don't you give me some very initial impressions, I guess?
So the first thing that I notice about the Trident is how much like a 650 it is. A pokey 650, don't get me wrong, but a 650 nonetheless. You know, it feels, you can feel that sophisticated triple feel. It feels, you know, like a premium option, kind of like the CBR 650R, but it's still a little bit soft. It's a little bit muted, not again in a bad way. I think it's a good motorcycle, but it feels like a half step up, you know, from something like the MT-07. I think it's a little bit better than the MT-07 just in terms of initial feel, but it doesn't feel as pokey, you know?
Now, just to validate what I said about the bike, you just rode the Aprilia up here, now you jumped on the Trident. The throttle is a little slow, isn't it?
The throttle feel is a little soft, it's delayed, it's... you can tell that there's some electronic limitation on it to keep you from unleashing all of that torque right away, because these triples are really flat in their torque curve, which is why people love them. But if you're walloped right in the face with, you know, 50-ish foot-pounds of torque, that can overwhelm somebody who could ostensibly get this as a beginner bike. Because, you know, while it is a zesty beginner bike, if you're a little older, you could probably make this work.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, we're definitely including that one in our beginner bike sweepstakes because we feel like it is a beginner-appropriate motorcycle, even if it is probably the tippy top of what we would consider to be a beginner bike. But the Aprilia here is a different story altogether. This is a premium motorcycle, a snappy motorcycle. Aprilia selling you this bike, probably knowing full well that you are a rider who has at least an idea of what's going on to ride this machine. The controls are all really snappy and direct on this thing. It's a pleasure to ride for someone who actually has some more experience, but could be a little intimidating for the beginner rider. So to me, as we've said many times, an absolutely ideal second motorcycle. But Spite, I think one of the things we noticed too was the difference in braking between these two bikes, right?
Yeah, no, the front brake on the Aprilia is sublime. It's really good. You can really just grab it with one finger for normal street duty. And on this one, it feels a little numb. It feels like feels a little bit soft. again, like everything else on the motorcycle, but it does stop the motorcycle. You know, it's not like it's dangerous.
Yeah, they're not dangerous. Yeah, they'll work, but
this bike handles pretty darn well, though. You know, it's no slouch.
yeah, that was one thing I really noticed about it too. Is side to side compared to an MT-07, it feels sublime.
Yeah, the MT-07's a really kind of shaky, rickety little thing. This thing feels very planted, it feels sophisticated, you know? It doesn't feel like your average 650 motorcycle. It feels, again, a lot like that Honda.
Yeah, but for $1,500 cheaper, $1,200, something like that.
Yeah, it's
pretty good.
Way cheaper.
Pretty good value for money there. But yeah, I think as we mentioned, the Trident is a great entry-level bike if you're more mature, but if you are starting out on that 250, 300, you know, entry-level type of thing, I think if you're trying to keep it to a nice streetable motorcycle with comfortable ergonomics, you don't care as much about peak power numbers, you just want something torquey and fun, the Trident's a great step up in that category. I think jumping from a 300 to a street triple, for example, is a big step up, and unless you're really about that sport bike life, it is a little bit of overkill, honestly.
Yeah, no, this thing feels totally happy to do all your typical everyday sport bike things without feeling so aggressive about it.
Yeah, it's funny because the Aprilia, when you compare it to an R6 or something, feels much softer and chill, but I just rode in the Triumph, and this thing feels razor sharp compared to the Triumph, you know?
I would probably end up giving it something like a 7 out of 10 for just your aggressive style of riding. It's certainly no track weapon, that's for sure. But then again, it's not trying to be, right?
Yeah, it's a bike that's meant to do this kind of stuff, right? Some fun back road twisties, some, you know, weekend riding. And, you know, I think we have to say the Trident has pretty good looks about it, not a polarizing ketchup and mustard mobile like the Aprilia over here.
Yeah, this thing is classically styled. I mean, it's a very...
I've heard Suzuki simp saying that it looks like a Gladius, and I could not disagree more.
Oh, no, it does not look anything like a Gladius. It feels a lot like, you know, a good homage to the Tridents from the 90s, you know?
Yeah, I'd really say that, you know, the Trident's for, again, that's someone who's coming from a super small displacement bike and wants a more grown-up, larger displacement street bike, but doesn't want to graduate to the, you know, middleweight naked category with your street triples, your Z900s, that kind of stuff. It's a great motorcycle for that, and a great bike for someone who wants to get into motorcycling and is respectable enough to, or respecting the bike enough to not get themselves into trouble, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the thing is, like, you know, I know that price is something that's really personal to a lot of people, but I really don't think your first bike should cost, you know, $11,500 like this Aprilia does. That's a lot of coin for your first motorcycle. Like, come on, you don't even know if you're gonna like it or not, you know?
Yeah, that's a spicy price tag.
Yeah, don't go and take out a loan for an Aprilia off your first bike. That sounds like a lot of headache. But Spike, there's something really important that I gotta talk to you about before we go out to the city riding. Hey, before we get started with the video today, very important announcement. Both these bikes are giveaway bikes. Hit the link down below to yamadu.co or go to yamadumerch.com. Get yourself entered to win either the Trident 660 or the Aprilia RS660. All right, Spike, we're out here in the urban environment, chopping up, whatever the verb is, the urban jungle here on these two bikes. And I think there's a lot to say, honestly. Where would you like to begin? Fit?
I'd like to talk about heat first of all, because this thing is hot. It's really hot sitting here.
It's an Italian
in the
bike,
city.
man. That's what they're all about.
Yeah, it's. I can definitely feel the fans working overtime to try and keep this thing cool. I mean, it's a pretty darn hopped up little engine, so it makes sense. You really got to keep it moving, otherwise, I mean, just there's a giant pile of heat under these fairings that hits me in the thighs every time we leave a stoplight.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Triumph, since it's a multi-cylinder engine, it's 3-cylinder instead of 2-cylinder. It's the same displacement, but it's very under stress for what it is. Runs pretty cool. I'm not really experiencing any heat on this bike at all, honestly.
Yeah, it's really making me wish that I was on the Trident again. But beyond that, I mean, I'm not particularly uncomfortable despite this being a fairly aggressive riding stance.
Yeah, I am supremely comfortable on the Trident. I feel like I could just sit here literally all day and not even feel it. But yeah, the Aprilia, I think, is a pretty comfortable bike for what it is. But one thing that I noticed a lot coming onto the Triumph again, back from the RS660, is just how, friendly and muted and subtle a lot of the componentry here is. The brakes are more squishy and subtle. The throttle response, we were goofing around about it earlier at a red light. I mean, it's so mellow to the point where it's like almost annoying as a more experienced rider, This is a motorcycle that I feel like is a little too friendly, to be honest.
Yeah, it's nice to be back on this bike where I can feel how zesty it is, There's a lot of panache and there's a lot of show to it. It's a very impactful motorcycle in a way that the Trident isn't.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to the Italian thing, right? I mean, the Italians make splashy, interesting, fun motorcycles, especially in the sport configurations, and this Triumph is very much a British bike. It's subtle, it's refined, it's sophisticated, all these adjectives that we typically reserve for things like Aston Martins and all that kind of stuff, right?
It looks really good in the city, though.
Yeah, this is its environment for sure.
And I got to imagine that kind of plush suspension is feeling nice over these bumps here, because
oh man, it's awesome. That's something I mentioned in my review, is the Trident suspension. For whatever reason, they dial it in such a way that it really handles bumps exceptionally well, and it's just so plush and comfortable, man. It's so nice to just be on this thing for long periods of time.
Meanwhile, I feel like I could roll over a penny and tell which side it's on based on the bump,
You're also, I dial that in for the track as well, so you're on a stiffer rebound suspension setting. So for you especially, since you're heavier than I am, that preload is dialed into my weight, so you're putting more weight on that spring. It's even tighter on it, and it's dialed in for more of a track setting, so I'm sure it feels quite firm and sporty for you.
Yeah, it's a little tough around town, I'm not going to lie, but, that's kind of the nice thing, is you have this fully adjustable suspension.
It's not fully adjustable, it's only rebound.
Oh, darn.
I know. We have to throw it in the bin now. It's useless.
Yep.
No, of course, the RS660's rebound-only compression is not a thorn in its side. I think the bike's geometry is so great that, even if it has a little bit more budget suspension, still works really well. But yeah, the Trident does not have that kind of componentry.
No, I think it's very reminiscent of the CBR or CB650R, where the suspension was non-adjustable, but it was set up really well for the bike's stock.
Yeah, I am honestly really thrilled with how the Trident feels around corners and around town. It's basically exactly what I would want out of a street motorcycle. Feels awesome. Can't say enough good things about the way it feels side to side.
Now, I know we've been kind of clowning on the throttle feel a little bit, but around town I also feel like this is just a bit spicy, It feels like it comes on, it's really torquey, and it really wants to go and rev out. So, I mean, does the muted throttle feel good?
I think for the intended audience of this bike, which are primarily entry-level riders, it's a great thing. I think they did a good thing by making it a little more subtle, a little more muted. But I prefer bikes like the RS660 where they punch hard and they give me exactly what I'm looking for, and they're super direct and tactile. I really, really like that. So, if you're a more experienced rider, I really don't think the Trident makes a lot of sense personally. I think there's more interesting options than the Trident if you're coming back to motorcycling and you've got a good amount of experience, but still a very good bike. I mean, you jumped off of it over at our Twisty Road section, and you're just like, it's a good bike. It leaves a good, strong impression,
Yeah, I think it's not going to blow anybody's minds. I think it's a solid, like, B+, but that's totally fine. It's that you don't have to deal with the likes of the Z650 anymore. You just don't. You don't have to live that life.
You don't have to get a Z650, guys. You heard it here first. I think even Zach I heard in some Revzilla podcast where he was clowning on the Z650 too, where he was like, it's a fine bike, it's fine, and I think the other host was like, oh, what's wrong with that or whatever. And yeah, we're not the only people who clown Z650s, is what I'm saying. Okay, there's better bikes.
For Zach, the moto journalist, the guy who He's literally a moto journo. To say something's fine, that'll tell you
It means
something.
it's bad. It means it's bad, guys.
It really sounds expensive when you ride it.
Yeah.
It sounds exotic. It's unfortunate because you can't really hear it when you're rolling around the city. You know, you get that little squeeze and you're already kind of done.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a bummer.
And for me as a taller rider, oh my God, I hate these mirrors. These mirrors are atrocious. I see a very blurry picture of my shoulders because the vibration up here just has them wiggling and wobbling like crazy.
Yeah, and to let the folks at home know, you're about 6'4" with your boots on.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you fit that bike just almost. It might be a little tiny for you, but you do fit on it, I'd say.
This is the bleeding edge of too small for me. It's right on that line. I can definitely make it work, but it's a little small. And same goes for that for me on the Trident. It's
honestly, even I feel a little big on this thing. I've got a serious bend in my legs, and I'm about 5'11", and I don't know. I don't really. It could be a little bit more substantial, in my opinion.
Yeah, but again, it's really, you know, that 1.5 bike. You know, the first and a half.
Which puts it in kind of a funny spot, in my opinion, where it's like, you know, it's a lot of bike for a beginner, but it's not that much bike for an experienced rider. So it's kind of in this weird middle ground, kind of like the RS660. The RS660 is in a bit of a weird middle ground too, right?
Yeah, it feels like not a 600, which thank God, because those are miserable around town. But then again, it doesn't have that kind of crazy screaming top end that you might want out of a bike that looks and feels like this.
Yeah.
And it's not as committed as you might want or something like that if you're really into that sport bike life.
Yeah. Whereas this is kind of the same if you're after an aggressive naked bike with a triple cylinder engine, you know, Yamaha will send you an MT-09, but this bike is, you know, so comfortable and nice and friendly. It's, you know, a little bit breeder for that reason. But it still gets up and goes pretty good.
Yeah, and when it does, it has a much more distinctive note than most 650s.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, it does.
It's the first time you can have that triple cylinder sound.
Everyone knows the Z650 sounds better than this bike, Spide. I like a lawnmower in my two-cylinder vehicle, two-wheel vehicles. I like
I'm gonna
that.
just let you get ahead just in case a lightning bolt comes out of nowhere and smites you.
Alrighty, Spite, what do you say that we wrap this video up?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Alrighty, everybody, wrapping the day up here with the Trident 660 and the RS660, and we've come to the conclusion that not all 660s are made the same. These two bikes are pretty different. Spite, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that the main difference between these two bikes is really how sophisticated the Aprilia feels. It feels like every bit of half an RS V4, half a V4. It's so just adult and so pulled together and so thoughtful and racy, whereas that, it not to diminish this bike because it's still a really great machine, but you can definitely feel where the corners were cut, where things were softened just a little bit for a perhaps beginner plus rider, somebody who has a little bit of time under their belt, done with their 250 or whatever.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's so many warning stickers on the Aprilia that tells you that it's not for a beginner rider, right? There's all these things telling you to be careful and to watch out, whereas the Triumph does not have that. But yeah, I think this is your beginner plus bike. I think I like the way you said that. This is a motorcycle that is very mellow, very friendly to ride. You can have a lot of pride of ownership over it. The price point is right, about $8,000 for this thing. I think this makes a great starter point if you're mature or if you're coming from a smaller displacement bike. But it is just crazy how you can't look at displacement and just think these bikes are the same. They're so different to ride. This one's so much snappier, so much more aggressive, so much more zesty and flickable, whereas this is just really more laid back and easy going, you know?
Yep. I feel like if I were to have one of these motorcycles, it would probably be that one, just because it's a little bit more chill for the kind of riding that I would normally do. But this is definitely your like weekend mistress mobile to me.
Yeah.
It's not the thing that I would ride on the daily because it is really hopped up, it's really hot, there's a lot of technology, it's really obtuse to use all the menus and so forth.
Yeah.
That you just turn it on and ride away. This you need to do a little bit of work to get all the settings tuned and so forth. But once you do, this is a really cool motorcycle.
And it's funny because for me, it's, you know, it's all about personal preference of these things, where I feel like the Aprilia is a perfectly competent daily rider. I would have so much fun if that was my only motorcycle, take it out to the track, have some fun with it, ride around all the time. Yeah, it's a little hot, but I just put up with it. You know, it's just, it is what it is. But maybe that's because I spent, I don't know, 30,000 miles on a Daytona 675R my first couple years of riding. So I'm pretty used to just committed, punishing riding experiences.
And for that, this is really not committed. It really feels relaxed, which is great if you want something that almost feels sort of sport touring-esque.
Yeah, you could definitely do a sport touring on that. It reminds me a lot of the seating position on your VFR, actually.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, it's a really chill motorcycle once you get past how just juiced it is.
Yeah.
Because this is a zesty motorcycle.
Yeah, I mean, it revs out hard and the power curve really kicks on later, whereas this makes a very flat, linear amount of power. And you're only looking at about 20 horsepower difference between these two. And we did a little roll-on acceleration test a couple of times. And in the real world, with you being a little heavier than me, they're about as fast as each other, but it really doesn't tell the whole story, you know? Like, this makes the power so differently.
Yes. It's definitely a motorcycle for the guy or gal who wants to go fast. This is your go fast motorcycle.
It says racing on the side of the tank there.
Yeah, where's the
Be a racer,
hashtag
right
be
in
a
front,
racer?
right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what Aprilia is trying to do there. I think their tagline is designed for racers, inspired by riders, or something like that, or maybe the other way around. I can't remember. I'm not an Aprilia spokesperson. I'm clearly a Triumph simp, even though I just picked the Aprilia. But I think that's gonna wrap it up for today. What do you guys think? Let us know down below in the comments about these different 660 class motorcycles. And remember, we're giving both of them away. And thanks to Manscaped for the support today on today's video. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later. You've made it to the end of a Yami Noob video. Did you like what you saw? Do you want to see more of it? Check it out, right here, just like magic, waiting for you. Click this little square right here. More memes, more Yami, more of my face. Isn't that great?